Now, it's called a cycle wisdom map, and it's this beautiful practice where you have all the different cycles laid on top of each other, and you start to fill out the document and you start to notice how similar the different phases feel. And in that particular document, like we had the circadian rhythm, so the 24-hour day. Then on top of that, we had layered the menstrual cycle. On top of that, we had layered these different seasons in nature. And on top of that, we had layered the different life phases of a woman. And as we filled it out, we were like, wow, there it really is like such an overlay. Welcome to Empower and Evolve, the vortex of growth that you have been looking for. I am your host, Kat Tunnyberg. I'm a mindset coach for female leaders, and I am committed to helping you cultivate the mindset shifts that generate you wild success. Each episode, we explore ways to tap into your true potential. We face the shadows that hold you back, and we embrace the journey toward your most abundant life. If you love what you learn here today, then I invite you to share this episode with someone that needs to hear it. Right, it's time to plunge in. Welcome to this episode, my love. Embracing feminine cycles. Ooh, yeah. I don't know if you know this about me, but before I started to go down the mindset coach route, I was actually doing menstrual cycle coaching. And my very first ever digital offer that I created was called Become Besties with Your Cycle. And it was an online course teaching women to learn to live cyclically in alignment with their menstrual cycle. Something that I kind of almost get to revisit this old version of me today on this podcast episode and teach you why I believe that living cyclically, and not just in alignment with your menstrual cycle, but in general with all the different cycles of nature, why that's important for women. In one of the previous episodes, I spoke about the connection of the feminine with nature. And this really beautifully ties into that as well, because the cycles that I'm going to be talking about today are, some of them are actually found in nature, and others are connected to nature through our own human experience. Let me rewind it though. What does it mean to live cyclically, or what even is a cycle? A cycle is, how do I best say this? A cycle is a cycle of events, energies that move through different parts of an experience. I have no idea if that I explained that well right now. But take a circle. A circle is kind of the embodiment of a cycle. And in the circle, we have all these different parts of the circle. And one part feeds into the next, feeds into the next, feeds into the next, feeds into the next, and then the same parts repeat in different experiences over and over and over again. And essentially, that is cyclical, because one cycle follows the next, one phase follows the next. And we know that we're going to be moving through these different phases as the cycle goes on. And I'm going to speak into the different cycles today and kind of give you a bit of a sneak overview into them and the different phases, and why I believe it's important to tap into them as a woman. In our patriarchal society, we are often expected to be the same and act the same and have the same energetic input and output day in and day out. And that's kind of semi-true if you're a man and you're only functioning on the circadian rhythm, because your hormones go through a cycle every 24 hours that is pretty rhythmical. Yet, even as a man having the circadian rhythm, you are still impacted by the cycles around you. So there's no freaking way that we can expect to show up the same way day in and day out as human beings. I was actually talking to my husband about this the other day. He is generally like a freaking energizer bunny. He's a manifesting generator and he just does not know how to sit still. And he generally wakes up really early and is like straight away super energized, and that's how he functions. In the winter, though, he notices that he sleeps longer. Like he wakes up at 7 a.m. instead of 5 a.m. in the summer. And he was like, oh, I wonder if something's wrong with me or if I'm sick. And I was like, no, babe, it's just winter. Like we're in the depth of the winter right now in Canada. It's like some of the darkest times. I guess we've passed this the winter solstice and are moving more into towards the light, but it's still we're in that darkness. And our bodies are hibernating in a way. They're craving to align themselves with nature. So cyclical living actually allows you to tap into living in alignment with nature around you and allow yourself to show up differently from day to day, month to month, year to year. And it's really important that we learn to work with these cycles instead of against them. When I first started learning about menstrual cycle awareness, which was kind of my introduction into all of this, I was 30 years old and I'd never heard about the fact that the menstrual cycle had 4 phases. I was like, what? I remember reading a book and being like, oh my God, this is mind blowing. And at the same time, I was really angry that this is not something that we get taught. And at the same time, again, when I was looking at those phases and like learning about it intellectually, I was like, oh, I've actually always felt this in my body. Like, this is something that intuitively I've always known. And yet I've never been conscious of it and aware of it. And one of the cornerstones of how I get my clients results, step one is awareness. We can't change things if we're not even aware of what the problem is. So sometimes we need to bring our awareness to what is actually going on. So then bringing the awareness to the piece of like, oh yeah, I have different phases of my cycle and my energy shows up differently and I can actually lean into these different phases and tap into them and live in accordance with them. Great. Awesome. Like that awareness was a game changer for me. And I still utilize this a lot. Like when I'm recording this right now, I'm on day 5 of my cycle, which means I'm starting to move towards my inner spring, my follicular phase, just out of menstruation. So I'm starting to notice the rise of the energy. And when I plan things ahead in my calendar, I actually look at where I'm going to be at in my cycle during the different things that I commit to. And this only really works if you have a fairly regular cycle. So if you do, you can actually add your phases into your calendar and have them as repeating events. That's one of my time management tips for you. Game changer. It's super simple and it makes such a difference. So one of the cycles that we get to embrace as women, if you are still in your menstruating years, is your menstrual cycle. And there's 4 phases. We have menstruation, we have our inner spring, our follicular phase, we have ovulation, our inner summer, and then we have the luteal phase, which is our inner autumn, and menstruation is the inner winter. So those are the 4 different phases. And I'm not going to go too into depth about all the different phases and what they mean, etc. But I'll give you just like a couple words so you can kind of start to become more aware of it. And then as I go into the different other cycles that you get to embrace as a woman, I'll do the same with those. And you can start to notice how they all overlap. And there's actually this really beautiful practice that I did when I did my menstrual cycle coach training. Now, it's called the cycle wisdom map. And it's this beautiful practice where you have all the different cycles laid on top of each other. And you start to fill out the document and you start to notice how similar the different phases feel. And in that particular document, like we had the circadian rhythm, so the 24-hour day. Then on top of that, we had layered the menstrual cycle. On top of that, we had layered this different seasons in nature. And on top of that, we had layered the different life phases of a woman. I think there might have been something else, but those are the ones that kind of come to me. And as we filled it out, we were like, wow, there it really is like such an overlay. So this is why when you, for instance, are in your menstrual cycle, on your menstrual phase, when you're on your bleed, and it's summer outside of you, you will experience your bleed and your energy differently than you will experience your bleed and your energy when it's winter outside. Like for me right now, even though I actually have quite a bit of energy and I'm feeling fairly creative in my inner winter this time, energetically, I'm even more so than normal noticing my desire to just be alone and hermit and be at home. And in the summer, that shows up, but less. There's more of a wanting to be extroverted and be around people because that's the energy of summer. And then, you've got the different layers of the moon cycles, etc. Anyway, I am going way ahead of myself. Coming back to the menstrual cycle and the four phases. In a winter, it's a time, your menstrual phase. It's time to slow down, be internal. Great time to reflect on the cycle you've had, what went well, what didn't go well as kind of start to plant some ideas for the next cycle ahead and set some intentions. Then we have our inner spring, our follicular phase. This is great to start taking some small actions on your intentions for the cycle ahead. Your energy will come back. You'll feel more creative. The biggest thing that I can tell, because I see this with so many women, is don't try to do too much too soon. There's this temptation coming out of menstruation and into inner spring when your estrogen is rising and you're starting to have more energy to suddenly do it all. That actually sets you up for burnout, which you're going to pay for once it comes around to your inner autumn, your luteal phase. So this is more a time to like really become visionary, like goal setting, taking the first steps towards those goals, planting the seeds. So it was more like an intention piece in winter, now you're actually planting the seeds and you're starting to take some small actions. That's the energy of spring. Then we have inner summer, ovulation. Like this is the time to take action, to be social, to do it all. Like this is superwoman phase, as some people like to refer it, even though you're superwoman all the time, you just energy shows up differently at different phases. But this is a time where you get to do it all and be it all and look after everyone and make sure to look after yourself still as well, because otherwise, again, you'll pay for it in your menstruation. Anyway, I'm trying to teach you too much in a short podcast episode today. Classical. Maybe I need to do another episode on the four phases because apparently I have a lot to say about them. Then we have the autumn phase, which this is kind of your luteal phase. This is a time to start to be more inward again, but it's a time to like tie up any loose ends, finish any projects, and also start to set more boundaries, start to say no, and start to prepare for your menstruation ahead. So really kind of clearing things out of your schedule so that you can allow yourself more rest and reflection time in your inner winter. So those are basically the four phases of your cycle in a really simple way. Then the other cycles that affect us as women is the moon cycles. So we've got, waxing, we've got the new moon, waxing, full moon, waning, new moon. So the four phases. Again, there's four phases. Who would have thought? And there's so many traditions that link the phases of the moon with the feminine energy, where, the new moon represents the new beginnings and the full moon represents the culmination. And in that way, the energies of the moon reflect that same kind of energetic pattern that I was teaching you. So the new moon would be the same as the inner winter. The waxing phase is the spring, ovulation is the full moon, and then waning is the inner autumn. So you can start to see the pattern, how they're all connected. And obviously, depending on where the moon is going to be at the different phases, is going to impact how you experience your menstrual cycle, for instance. Now, a little piece here, which is kind of more folklore, I don't know if there's any proof around it or anything, but I kind of like the idea. And if I reflect back on my own cycles and how they have changed to align with the different phases of the moon, I can kind of see this playing out. It's said that the women who bleed on the new moon, so whose inner winter is aligned with the winter season of the moon cycle, are the ones that are meant to um, like fall pregnant or birth a new child. Like they're more in an internal phase where they're living for themselves and they're about to birth something big. And then women who bleed on the full moon, which is kind of the opposite energies, right? Because if we look at the full moon, it's kind of the culmination of the moon cycle, more of that summer energy, that fire energy. And then if you're bleeding at that time, which is when you're at your lowest energetic point, there's a bit of like a push and a pull. And the women that are bleeding on a full moon are apparently more living for others. So they're meant to be of service and they're meant to help humanity and really kind of be outward focused at that phase of their life. And then anytime I reflect on how my own cycle has changed, because your cycles change, they're very things affect your menstrual cycle a lot. Stress, your environment, changes to your diet, so many things. Like I just came out of a 42-day menstrual cycle, which is very unusual for me. And the only time, like since I've started tracking my cycle really firmly, since like 2020, the only time I've had such a long cycle was when I had like COVID back in 2022. So, it was definitely wild. But there was a lot for me that has happened this last year. These last few months, I went to Australia. I, supported the beautiful master practitioner training, was in a high, like summer climate, and come back to Canada. It's the depth of the winter, time to be internal. And then you go into the holidays, and it was just my body was probably like, what is even going on? Where are we? What the fuck? So I threw my cycle off and I ovulated on like day 27 of my cycle or something. But because I track my like both my temperature and my mucus, I knew what was going on in my body. So I wasn't too worried about my cycle being longer than usual. Anyway, I digress again. Coming back to the moon cycles, anytime I reflect when I have either bled on the new moon or the full moon, those energetic patterns have been very true for me. So this is where you can start to get curious about yourself. And this is why, if you're new to this practice, it's actually very beneficial to journal about your cycle and really start to notice the different energetic patterns and how they are showing up. And when you journal about your cycle, you can actually add the different moon phases in there as well. So you can start to recognize your own patterns. And if you didn't know, I have a free course that teaches you this, how to track your cycle using a written tracker. I'll get Alexis to link it in the show notes. It's from the time when I was mainly focusing still on menstrual cycle work, but it's such a great tool for you to start using. So if this is new to you, I really recommend doing that. And I really recommend you bring in the moon cycles as well when you do this. Then we have the seasonal cycles that affect us as women. So these are the outer seasons. We have spring, summer, autumn, and winter. I think it's like most of us recognize the different energies of these different phases. Again, they very much align with the different energies that have been spoken about. Winter being menstruation, new moon, spring being follicular phase, waxing moon, summer being ovulation, full moon, and then autumn being the waning luteal connection. So you can see the patterns that are affecting us. And then the final cycles that actually, there's two that I want to bring in here. The final kind of cycles that are really connected to nature and affect us as women is our life stages. And there's 4 predominant life phases as a woman. We have the energy of the maiden, the mother, the wild woman, and crone. I have a course that teaches you this. It teaches both the seasonal framework. It also teaches you the traditional Chinese medicine element framework. And then it teaches you about the archetypal framework with your cycle and how that all shows up. So I'll get that one linked in the show notes below as well. It's only 97 Canadian dollars. It's a beautiful course. It's in my opinion quite spiritual to really learn to connect to your cycle from those angles and really see all the different frameworks that you can use to connect to your menstrual cycle. Coming back to how this shows up for us as women, though, in the first around 25 years of our life, we're in our maiden energy. And that is the energy of spring. Like it's this like freshly hatched, you're like creative, you're ready to experience life with arms wide open. And you kind of have this reckless energy and innocence to you. Then we have 25 to 50-ish is when you're in the mother energy. It's when you're taking care of yourself and others and you're really becoming more embodied in who you are and know who you are. And that reckless abandon of the youth has kind of been set aside a little bit. Then 50 to 75-ish is when you're stepping into your wild woman. And this is where you're actually becoming truly embodied in who you are. And you kind of have this no fucks given energy. And this is where boundaries become really important. And this energy is very connected to your luteal energy, your inner autumn, where you kind of have that stage where like what you've been handling for most of your life, most of your cycle now actually is bothering you. Like that's a bit of a thing in your life phase, which some people call like a midlife crisis and whatnot, but maybe what if it's not your midlife crisis and it's actually you just stepping into who you really are and not giving a fuck anymore? Very powerful era. And then the final is 75 to 100-ish. Again, we don't all live until 100, but you get what I mean. The crone. And this is where you really step into your wisdom. And, you've seen life, you've experienced life, and you almost become fearless because you have seen it all and experienced it all and nothing can shake you kind of energy. So all of these different cycles affect us as women. And the more we can learn about these different cycles and learn to tap into these different energies at different times, and the more we can become embodied in the wisdom of who we are and learn to live life according to us instead of chasing success in a way that doesn't feel aligned with us. So we become really embodied in our feminine wisdom. This podcast is dropping on January 20th, and I am hosting my Becoming the Matriarch masterclass tomorrow, if you're listening to this on the January 20th. And that masterclass is super powerful. If you're listening to this on Monday and you have not yet registered, please go to the show notes and register for the masterclass. It's really beautiful. You will be sent a replay. And during that masterclass, this is again, if you're a podcast listener, you'll be the first to know. On that masterclass, I will be announcing one of my signature programs making a comeback. My signature program, Unleashed, which is my feminine embodiment program, which I launched in the summer of 2024, which the 7 women that went through the first cohort had incredible results. Some of the biggest transformations I've seen in a short time. And it's the one course where I've really drawn in my lived experience and all my different modalities and really mashed them together to really help you connect to your feminine wisdom from within and claim the strength within you. And this time, the angle that I'm taking with this course is learning to tap into your feminine embodiment in order to use that to become the feminine leader that you were destined to be. So it's really about embracing your feminine in order to transform your life and create success on your terms. So there is going to be a little bit of a twist of the modules that I'm going to be recording. So it's really about becoming a leader and transforming your life through connecting to the feminine. It's a very deeply personal course that teaches you a lot about yourself as well as others around you, which is going to have a positive ripple effect into all areas of your life. You're the first to know that it's coming back. I am going to be pre-recording modules that are going to be dropping every week. There's going to be 13 different modules guiding you through this journey of connecting inward so that you can say goodbye for burnout for freaking good. And I know that you desire this because I know that if you're here, if you're on this podcast, you desire to find balance. You desire to live life on your terms. You desire complete personal empowerment where you have the confidence and the skills to make the decisions that align with your true self, free from any societal expectations or your past limitations. You desire this deep connection to yourself and others where you know exactly who you are in your inner self. And through that, you are able to create the most meaningful relationships with those around you. This helps you heal any of your past wounds and helps you foster this really beautiful, supportive community. It helps you to live authentically and joyfully. And this is beyond just achieving specific goals that you may have on your vision board. It's actually about living your life filled with joy, passion, and authenticity. And this course also teaches you how to master your emotional and physical well-being. So it teaches you how to regulate yourself, manage stress, manage emotions, and manage your physical health effectively. This means learning to understand your patterns in a way that you've never understood them before. And ultimately, all of this will give you so much spiritual fulfillment and allow you to live in a really intuitive way. So on tomorrow's masterclass, Becoming the Matriarch, I am announcing this new revamped version of Unleashed. It's going to be pre-recorded modules. They drop once a week, 13 modules. And then you'll also have access to a private community for 3 months where you can share your takeaways, you can share your learnings, you can share your aha moments, you can connect with your fellow beautiful matriarch women. And you also get to tap into our bi-weekly group coaching calls to ask questions about the material, ask questions specific to the play work that I'm going to be giving you, and really ask how you can take this knowledge and embody it. I'm so excited for the relaunch of this course. It's going to be freaking amazing. And I'm going to put the link to the sales page into the show notes so that if you're listening to this and you're like, wow, this is exactly what I need, then this is for you. It's going to be a beautiful journey. And I'm really excited for you to dive into it. And I really want you to encourage to learn to live cyclically. Embrace the cycles around you, embrace the cycles within you, and learn to accept that you're different every single day and that makes you beautiful and powerful. Because the divine feminine is the most powerful force to be reckoned with. And it is my mission to help you connect to her. Catch you next week. Thank you for joining me on the Empower and Evolve podcast. I hope that today's episode has sparked a new insight, or perhaps reminded you of your own power to manifest change. If you found value in our time together, I invite you to subscribe and share this podcast with someone who might need a little reminder of their own magical power. It would mean the world to me if you could take just 2 minutes to review the podcast and help it reach more people. And remember, the journey of transformation is ongoing. And sometimes the most powerful step that we can take is to simply pause, breathe, and realign with our deepest intention. Until next time.